just introduce ourselves briefly and then say a little bit about how we're going to run this hour together. Start with my top left-hand corner. Olya, Khaleelee.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, Olya, Khaleelee. Lovely to be here. I'm the Associate Director and very much looking forward to working together and to talking today about the conference and what it means to attend a conference like this.
Sally.
Hello, everybody. Sally Mussared. I am the Director of Administration for the conference, and yeah, looking forward to the conversations tonight.
Sandra.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, Sandra Falconer, and I've just enrolled in the grad cert, and this would doing the MLM 2, and so this conference would be part of the grad cert for me. So I'm looking forward to hearing about it.
Welcome. Jill.
Hi, my name is Jill Heyman. I have my own business called Human Insights. I have done a little bit of work courses I've done at the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the residential conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Tinglee.
Thank you, Leslie. Hi, everyone. My name is Tinglee Zhou. I'm in Beijing, China. I'm very much interested in group relations work, so appreciate to meet you all here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tinglee. Ignatius.
Hi, my name is Ignas. I'm from Jakarta, Indonesia. So I'm interested in the organizational development practice, but I haven't really heard much about the group relations conversation or experience. So I'm interested to know more about this.
Okay, thanks, Ignas. And Sally, could you do an acknowledgement of country for us, please?
Sure. Thank you, Leslie. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from which I'm coming to you from. I normally join from Wurundjeri country, but visiting Canberra, Ngunnawal country up here today. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that was never ceded, and acknowledge the elders past and present. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. So I think that's a fitting place to begin, really, isn't it? Thinking about what does acknowledgement of country mean? Because on one level, a group relations conference has a country of its own. It's like a territory in a sense. And it has a history that goes back to the 1950s. That's rooted in the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. And it was a way of studying the dynamics of authority and role-taking within systems. What's on your minds? What would you like to discuss? Are there any questions, any thoughts you have? Maybe.
Would you like to have a bit of a conversation, the two of you, about what is a group relations conference, as opposed to a typical, many commercial conferences where one attends and listens to papers from presenters? I'm wondering if you could explain a bit more.
Well, this is the opposite. No papers, no explanations. You're thrown into the swimming pool, so to speak, and of course, it is experiential. And I can remember the first conference I went to was rather bewildering, but you do get to grips with it eventually and begin to realize that, you know, how to take your own authority. I think that is the primary focus of how do you mobilize your strength and your capacities to take up a particular role. And that so the conference is set up as a sort of temporary organization or a temporary society, or a fractal of society, if you like, depending on whatever the theme is. But when we're looking at authority and role, then we're thinking about organizations. They're set up as a temporary organization, and then, you know, I take up a role within that, and I have to think about, well, how am I engaging within the different groups which I'm taking up membership? So the actual format of, usually there's a small group, there's a large group, there are different size groups, and there are usually, you know, some kind of institutional or organizational event. So these are a sort of wonderful playground in which you can experiment and see, well, what will happen if I take up my role like this, or what will happen if I take it up like that. So it's a way of maybe trying things out that one doesn't normally in everyday life. And it can be completely, or at least it was for me, completely exhilarating. Really, really fascinating. And it opens up a whole new dimension to how you engage with the organizations.
I think it might be worth also adding that some of the early development work came out of the relationship with people like Kurt Lewin in America and the organization that grew up around him, the National Training Laboratories. And so there is a really interesting distinction between the NTL, the National Training Laboratories methods, and the Tavistock methods. And it's to do with the unit of study. So in the NTL laboratory method, you're studying the individual in a group. In the Tavistock method, you're studying the group as a whole. So it's a subtle way of naming it, but really it comes from the psychoanalytic ideas that we are porous beings and thoughts can be located in one by an other. So a system is able to think through its members and therefore act through its members, sometimes and not always with the members' permission, so that we get moved, Olya used the term mobilized, that we can act in ways that are a little alien to us in certain environments. And the group relations conference is designed for you to be able to test, isolate, experiment with how you are moved to behave in a group. And that, I think, is really exhilarating, because you discover that you don't have to behave in the ways that you've always behaved, or you don't have to be the person you've always been. There are choice points where you can encounter new forms of thinking and therefore new forms of operating. And so I think that is an important distinction to hold on to. In a group relations conference, you're looking at how a group can make you do things. And when we look at what's happening in the world right now, there's a lot of people that could do with taking some time to think about what is the world making us do.
Definitely.
So we don't have to be victims of circumstance. We might be able to wake up enough to say yes or no. And so in that way, many people have said that group relations can be seen as a little subversive, because people discover that they have choice. And so they don't have to just reenact and replicate systems. They can create new ones. So I remember my first conference. It was a Grub Institute conference. And I was so struck by the brochure. It didn't make any sense to me. I read it, all the words were English. I knew them, but I didn't quite understand what it was trying to describe, this thing about role and authorization. It just didn't make sense. And there was something that clicked in the middle of the conference, that it was so well structured that in its tightly bounded sense of time and task, it gave you freedom. And so I had the actual experience of feeling at the same time trapped by these things that began on time and ended on time, and the staff were so rude. They didn't speak to anybody, they upped and left. But in that, there was absolute freedom for the members to be and do and say whatever they wanted to be, do and say. It was amazing. And I thought, if we could run all organizations like this, it could be a very different world. And I was hooked right at the beginning. So.
Could I throw a question in there?
Yes, of course.
I'm curious then about the impact that these conferences may have had on you early on then, and what changed for you after the conference within the organisation you may have been working in, or organisations. How did it flow through?
So for me, I was a senior associate director of partnerships in the NHS at the time. And so I had a revenue responsibility of 14,400,000 staff. And it gave me a language for the feelings that I had when I'd go into certain types of meetings. And so before the conference, I didn't quite have the language to articulate projections and how they affect you in taking up a role. Post-conference, I was able to articulate it. So I knew that there were things I was encountering in role that before I didn't quite understand. And as a result of the conference, I did understand it, and I had a language for it that enabled me to take up my role in a very different way. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
I think for me, I was at that time, the reason I actually attended a conference was because I'd just taken up a role as an internal consultant in a failing takeover and merger in a multinational setting. And this organization was about to be divested from the group, and all sorts of consultants had been brought in, technical consultants, and at the end the managing director had decided, well, we should try out these group relations people just in case they can do anything. So we were thrown into this failing organization, and the first thing we did was I went with my boss to the Leicester conference, and going with your boss isn't necessarily a great thing. So not only have to deal with yourself, you have to deal with all your projections onto your authority figure within a setting that's looking at authority. So this was very tricky for me, and I think rather confusing. But I went again 3 years later, and that was an entirely different experience. But in between, my boss went to the Tavistock Institute. We had carried out a survey of this organization, of the people in this organization, to see how they were feeling about the state of it and this takeover and merger. And we had a hypothesis which we wanted to offer to the organization of 1,100 people. So my boss went to the Tavistock Institute and met this man called Dr. Eric Miller, and asked him this question: how do you offer an interpretation to 1,100 people? And as a result of that, Eric Miller became the external consultant to us internal consultants within the organization, worked with us for a number of years. And in fact, he brought in, we ran a program in the organization called the People Program, which was a direct application of this conference model into the organization, working with 128 managers from the top right down to supervisory level. And we ran small groups, we had an intergroup exercise. And for 2 years in that organization, they ran a large group. Eric Miller and my boss ran a large group, and all managers were allowed to attend. It was held once a week for 1.5 hours, and the task was to reflect on the state of this organization. And as a result of that process, the organization turned itself around because the management, whom we also sent off to experience these conferences separately as part of their training and development, they began to find their own authority and they changed the way they operated. So the end result was that this organization became the star of the division in its profitability and the way it functioned, and the capacity of the management to hold the boundaries, manage the boundaries and manage themselves in role in a way in which they hadn't been able to do before. That was a sort of direct application. It is actually written up in a book called OD in the UK and the USA, which was published in 1975 and edited by a man called Carey Cooper. It's a paper by Eric Miller. He wrote it.
Thank you. That's so interesting to hear. Yeah.
I think embedded in that story is something about scale, I think. And there are no big or little things because change is nested and enveloped in different layers of organizational life, so that a small change in one role holder in one tiny department has potential exponential ripples out into the whole system. So in that idea of the wisdom in the group, the wisdom in the individual, that a small change is not small. Its change and its impact can become really significant.
It did. In fact, in that particular example, it did. I mean, as part of an internal consulting group, we were called the head shrinkers within the organization. And workers used to walk past our windows. We were sitting in a factory. They used to walk past our windows and look at us, and we'd be looking at them. So we had a kind of dynamic going on between us. But as this people program developed, subgroups, as Leslie says, subgroups began to come to us and wanted to set up groups of their own to examine how they were functioning. So a group of engineers came to us and said they had a project. Could we provide consultancy to their project within the organization? And that ran for several months and helped them think about how they were carrying out their roles within the wider system of the organization. The actual impact, I think, of group relations on organizational life can be very, very powerful.
Can I ask a question in relation to that? So the Leicester conference is 2 weeks and this is a shorter period of time. Is it somewhat similar to the Leicester conference?
In the sense that the broad structure is the same. So you have opening and closing plenaries.
Yeah.
And then you have small group and large group work. And you have an element of intergroup and institutional events. What we're doing also is an event called I Am the Land event, which is creating the conditions for us to explore our relationship to the environment.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thank you.
And there's review groups and application groups as well. So that group relations structure is embedded in it, yeah.
Yes, I think it's this model, it's a wonderful combination of tradition and innovation. And I think the idea of I Am the Land group event is very interesting. It'll be fascinating to see how that develops. The other elements that Leslie's described are traditional. You would find them at a Leicester conference, most other conferences that look at authority issues, because they all tend to be modelled on that, really, initially, on that on the Leicester conference.
Can I ask a question too? I'm wondering, is there also time for, I know there's no papers and lectures or anything like that, but interpretation by the consultants to help with understanding what is occurring in the groups? Is there some application of the theory or during the week, some interpretation or understanding of both the theory and what's occurring?
All the events will be staffed with consultants whose job is to offer material for the group to think about what might be happening. So there's here and now consultancy, which is what's happening in the moment. There's there and then consultancy, which is looking back and reviewing. And there's there and then consultancy that's helping to look forward outside the conference. So its design is to, when Olya talked about the boundaries and management holding the boundaries so people can discover things in new ways in role taking, it's the same principle in the conference. So the staff hold the boundary and create the conditions through their interpretations, and their presence is something for material to be generated for people to discover. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How am I doing it? But there's the paradox piece, because we are working with authority. So the consultant might say something, but the truth making of that is inside the authority of the listener. I say your eyes are blue, but until you say that your eyes are blue, your eyes are not blue.
I'm curious, this conference in Australia is hybrid, online and in person. So I'm a little bit think of that challenge, how to deal with that hybrid.
I would encourage you to come in person, because particularly because we're going to be working with the land. I think there's a difference to working with the land in person and in hybrid. But hybrid, it works. You know, the dynamics of the group work whether we're online or in person, but it's different how you encounter it, whether you're in presence with your body or remote with your body. But I would say if you can, come in person.
And if I can add to that, Leslie,
Yeah,
this is NIOTA ran a group relations conference 2 years ago that was hybrid. So we've done this before, and we've learned from that, building our expertise. But yeah, it's the other thing for me is that the realization that we do still feel emotions and experiences through the screen. We can watch a movie and cry, and we it's not even real. It's a made up movie that was filmed some time ago, and we can still feel that emotional connection. So for me, that's a big part of understanding that we can still feel connected even though we're not in the space, if that's necessary.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's worth re-watching. There's 2 films, talked about them the other day. One of them is called Lucy, and the other one is called Her. So they're both films about people and their relationship with technology, which I think are well worth watching. It might also be worth sharing while you were in your group. We had a little conversation because I was having a song in my head that I thought the title of it was Confused, Bothered and Bewildered. But on looking at Google, we discovered actually it's bewitched, bothered, and bewildered. So, wondering what that might mean for us as we prepare to gather. To me, it speaks to something magical and the capacity to be completely in love with something, which Olya outed me and said, I think Leslie's in love with group relations. And I am, so yes. Let's all fall in love with it.
I think because I haven't really had much experience about the group relations. So I think for me, like this is a crash course in understanding as much as I can in the last like 40 to 50 minutes. I don't know whether this is the characteristic of like Indonesian people when we are trying to bring this kind of work. But usually when we approach or when my team and I approach organizations to do dialogic work like OD or satire or whatnot, they usually come back with us with this question. So how do you measure the impact quantitatively? Because for them, if it doesn't affect certain metrics in their organizations, like bottom line and things like that, it is deemed as not as important, especially because right now, like there are a lot of layoffs, restructurization, and so on. So they tend to prioritize projects or improvement projects that directly affect the bottom line and the metrics in the organizations. So I'm just wondering whether any of you are experiencing like the same challenges, and if so, how do you approach it?
Yeah. I think there is always a pull to a quick fix. And I think it's embedded in Olya's story in how they took the work into an enterprise and took time. So they had a leadership that was invested over time to make something happen. And I think as a dialogic practice, it's to speak with the hosts, the commissioners of the work, to really test what are they really committed to over time. Because often you'll flush out that they're not really interested. They just want a quick fix because they've either got their eyes on their next promotion or they're too frightened to face what needs to be faced, which is giving people room and questioning authority structures. But I think there is pressure in the system. Anyway, we're going to honor the tradition by marking the time boundary. It's now hour, wherever you are. And just to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions, your participation, and we hope to see you in Woodend in person in October. And spread the word, tell your friends and colleagues, and keep in touch with us if there's anything that you need further thinking on. We're here for you. Okay, thank you all.